The night was quiet in Waco, Texas, too quiet for a voice that once carried across the world. Behind an old apartment complex, beside the hum of air conditioning units, a young man who once stood at number 1 on the Billboard charts lay still. He was only 31 years old. But long before that final night, he was the soundtrack of so many American childhoods. Maybe you remember it. Maybe it takes just a single note of The Kissing Game to bring you back, to a school gym lit by soft lights, to a slow dance you were too shy to lead, to the feeling that music could make the world gentler for a moment. How does a voice that pure, a dream that bright, fall so far, so fast? And what happens to the boys we crown as stars before they even finish growing up? This is the journey of Tony Thompson, the heart of Hi-Five, a group that helped define 90s R&B and shaped the blueprint for every boy band that followed. It's a story of rise and fallout, of success that came too early, and of a young black artist whose gift touched millions, even as the world around him slowly pulled him apart. He didn't start on a stage. He started in a small Texas church, where the sunlight came through stained glass windows and dust floated in the air like tiny blessings. In those wooden pews of Waco, people whispered about a little boy with a voice too big for his age. A voice that rose above the choir, above the room, above the kind of life most children in that town were expected to live. Tony Thompson was born on September 2, 1975, but from the way elders talked about him, you'd think he'd been born with a microphone in his hand. He sang with the youth choir the way some kids breathe, effortlessly, naturally, as if his body had been built for melody. And when he opened his mouth, the room would shift. Adults paused mid-conversation. Children stopped fidgeting. Even the choir director would glance over her shoulder and smile like she already knew she was witnessing the beginning of something rare. Yet talent in a small town can be both a blessing and a cage. Waco wasn't a place where dreams of stardom felt realistic, but Tony carried his dream the way he carried every note, with conviction. He began to tell his family that he didn't just want to sing, he wanted to be a singer. A real one. A professional. Someone whose voice reached farther than the church walls. So he sang anywhere he could, talent shows, community festivals, small-town gatherings where folding chairs clicked open and people brought homemade food. Every time he stepped onto those modest stages, he won. Not because the judges felt sorry for a child competing against grown men, but because Tony already had the thing adults spent years trying to develop, identity. His voice didn't sound like anyone else's. It wasn't borrowed or imitated. It was his. And that's what caught the attention of a group of older boys from Waco called Adore. They were chasing their own dream, rehearsing in garages and back rooms, hoping their harmonies would carry them somewhere bigger. When they got signed to Jive Records, the first R&B act from Waco to ever do it, the whole town buzzed. But one member, William Walton, kept thinking about the little kid who won every talent show. He remembered Tony's voice. He remembered the promise he'd made. When we get in the door, I'm bringing you with me. And true to his word, once Adore secured their footing, William reached back. He connected Tony with two New York-based managers who were searching for fresh talent, Vinnie Bell and Robert Ford. These weren't small-town dreamers. These were industry men, men who had seen enough potential stars to know how rare the real ones were. They were looking to build something reminiscent of the Jackson 5 or New Edition, young, charismatic, powerful in harmony, undeniable in presence. When they heard Tony sing for the first time, they didn't just hear talent. They heard possibility. They heard a future. They asked him a simple question. Do you know anyone else who can sing like you? Tony did. He brought in two friends, Toriano Easley, a teenager from Oklahoma with a voice as bold as his personality, and Russell Neal, calm, steady, reliable. Together, the three boys called themselves the Playmates, and though the name felt fun and innocent, the ambition behind it wasn't. They recorded their first demo with dreams that stretched far beyond Waco. But the record executives weren't satisfied. Something in the sound wasn't full enough yet. Something was missing. And in the music business, missing pieces can end careers before they even start. So Tony, Toriano, and Russell weren't discouraged when Bell and Ford suggested adding new members. They understood the assignment. If you want to build a legacy, you build a team. Soon, Pooh and Marcus Sanders joined the lineup, bringing the group to 5, symbolically important for a boy band modeled after the greats. And just like that, something clicked. The harmonies made sense. The energy balanced. The vision sharpened. But before they could release anything, reality stepped in. All 5 boys were teenagers, 15, maybe 16. Parents had to sign papers. Courts had to approve contracts. Childhood had to be exchanged for adulthood, almost overnight. When the ink finally dried and the documents cleared, they officially joined the Jive Records family. The label believed in them. Their managers believed in them. And now the boys had to believe in themselves. There was only one final hurdle, the name. The Playmates couldn't be used. Hugh Hefner owned the trademark through Playboy. So they needed something new. Something young. Something that felt like victory. They chose Hi-Five. A name that fit perfectly. 5 boys. One dream. One upward motion, palm to palm, as if celebrating every step that brought them closer to the stage they'd been chasing since childhood. And standing in the center of it, steady, glowing, unmistakable, was Tony Thompson, the kid from Waco whose voice had only just begun to show the world what it was capable of. Success didn't arrive quietly for Hi-Five. It came rushing in, loud, bright, and impossible to ignore, like a spotlight suddenly switching on in a dark room. One moment they were 5 teenagers from modest beginnings, the next, they were stepping into studios with producers who reshaped the sound of an entire generation. Their first single, I Just Can't Handle It, carried the unmistakable fingerprints of Teddy Riley, the architect of New Jack Swing. The beat was sharp, the harmonies clean, and Tony Thompson's voice soared above it all with a warmth that felt both young and timeless. When the song climbed into the top 10 of the R&B charts, it was more than a debut. It was a declaration. Hi-Five had arrived. But even as the video began bubbling on TV and radio stations across the country, a storm was forming behind the scenes. On September 1, 1990, just weeks before their album release, Toriano Easley was arrested in Oklahoma, charged in a shooting that ended a man's life. He claimed the gun had gone off during a fight. Authorities charged him with first-degree murder. He was just a teenager. For most groups, that kind of tragedy would have ended everything. But the machine didn't stop. It couldn't stop. Contracts had been signed. Timelines set. The boys had to keep going, even with one of their original brothers suddenly gone. And so, searching for a missing piece, Vinnie Bell discovered a young singer at a Christmas talent show in the Bronx, a teenager named Treston Irby, singing a cappella in the back seat of a car. His tone was smooth, earnest, confident. In that moment, the lineup clicked back into place. Hi-Five was whole again. Just days later, their debut album dropped. And then came the song that changed everything. I Like the Way, The Kissing Game, wasn't just a hit. It was a phenomenon. The beat was soft, the melody sweet, and Tony's voice delivered every line with the innocence of young love. The song shot to #1 on both the R&B chart and the Billboard Hot 100, earning platinum certification and becoming one of the defining records of the early 90s. Across America, teenagers slow danced to it at school gyms decorated with streamers and balloon arches. Couples shared their first kiss to it. Radios played it endlessly on warm summer nights. The song didn't just belong to the group, it belonged to the culture. With success came a whirlwind. Tour buses. Suitcases. Autographs written on lunch breaks. Hotel rooms that blurred together. Fans screaming their names before they were even old enough to vote. Hi-Five danced with the precision of seasoned performers, switching between streetwear and tailored suits like it was nothing. They toured with giants, Salt-N-Pepa, LL Cool J, Troop, Tony, Tone, Ice Cube. Everywhere they went, someone wanted to touch the magic they carried. And yet, even in the glow of success, the boys remained just that, boys. Teenagers doing homework with tutors backstage. Young men learning fame faster than they learned adulthood. Then came another breakthrough. I Can't Wait Another Minute. Ironically, the group never believed the song would become a hit. They wanted an upbeat track for their next single. But the label pushed forward, and the song became their crossover moment. #1R&B, #8 on the pop chart. Suddenly, Hi-Five wasn't just an R&B act. They were a pop force. Their music reached movie theaters too. Their song, Too Young, played in the background of Boys in the Hood, during the barbecue scene when Doughboy returns home as a grown man. On that track was a teenage rapper who would later become a legend, prodigy of Mobb Deep, then known as Lord T the Golden Child. Everything seemed to be aligning. The awards. The tours. The exposure. The feeling that the world was wide open and theirs to take. But what made it all work, what made Hi-Five feel different, was Tony Thompson. Tony didn't just sing the notes. He filled them. He colored them with emotion. He gave the group a center, a heartbeat, a sound instantly recognizable from the first syllable. Older fans compared him to a young Michael Jackson, not because he tried to sound like Michael, but because he carried that same purity, that same emotional honesty. Younger fans adored him because he looked like them, spoke like them, and made them believe that someone from a place like Waco could sing his way onto the world's biggest chart. By the time their debut album went platinum, Hi-Five had become more than just a boy band. They were symbols of a moment in black music, a moment where harmony groups reigned, where R&B ruled radio, where young artists shaped the dreams of millions. And yet, behind the applause, behind the photo shoots and interviews and Billboard headlines, something silent was forming beneath the surface: pressure. Expectations. Business decisions made by teenagers who barely understood contracts. The kind of weight that fame places gently on your shoulders at first, before it begins to crush you. But for now, in this chapter of their story, the light was still bright. The future still felt safe. And Tony Thompson, the voice that lifted them all, was still rising, still glowing, still singing as if nothing could dim him. Success can make a young man feel invincible. But for Hi-Five, the first cracks didn't come from the outside world. They came from within, quietly at first, then loudly enough to shake everything they had built. As the applause of their debut era faded into the pressure of sustaining success, the boys began questioning the very foundation of their career. They were famous, yes. They were chart-topping stars. But when they looked at their bank accounts, the numbers didn't match the headlines. So they did something bold, something only teenagers who didn't yet understand the machinery around them would dare to do. They fired their managers. Vinnie Bell and Robert Ford, the men who discovered them, shaped them, protected them, were suddenly gone. Treston Irby didn't want the split, but he was outvoted. In their place, the group elevated the road manager, Jonathan Kinloch, to lead them. They believed they were claiming their independence. They thought they were taking control. But independence is heavy, especially when you're too young to know what it really costs. Soon after, the group marched into the offices of Jive Records demanding answers. How are we the hottest group out, and still not making money? The label replied the way labels always do. You haven't recouped yet. To the boys, it sounded impossible. To the older executives, it was business as usual. Credit card expenses. Hotel rooms. Wardrobe. Food. Travel. Every luxury they thought was part of being a star had been added to a bill they didn't know they were paying. And as the truth sank in, one member refused to stay quiet. Russell Neal stood up for the group. He demanded transparency. He demanded that the label explain every dollar. And he insisted that they shouldn't perform again until someone taught them how the business worked. But Russell was alone. The others were afraid of losing momentum, or losing deals, or losing the dream entirely. And so, Russell walked away. First quietly. Then permanently. The group carried on without him, releasing their second album, Keep It Goin' On, in 1992. Despite the internal turmoil, the music still soared. She's Playing Hard to Get shot to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The fans never knew anything was wrong. But destiny had its own timetable. During a promotional run in Florida, the group traveled down I-95 in a van that should have been just another forgettable ride between radio interviews. Instead, it became a turning point so devastating that even the survivors were changed forever. Another driver slammed into them from behind. The van spun, flipped, crashed. One by one, the members crawled out, shaken, bruised, scared, but alive. Then they turned to help their brother. Pooh tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't move. He whispered, "I can't feel my legs." He never walked again. He had always been the bright one, the energetic one, the boy who made rehearsals feel like hanging out with friends. Now he was paralyzed from the chest down. The weight of that loss settled on all of them like fog. The innocence of their teenage stardom evaporated in a single moment. To numb the grief, some members drifted toward drinking and drugs. It wasn't rebellion. It was escape. And yet, even from his wheelchair, Pooh remained part of the family. He asked Russell Neal to return to the group, not for fame, not for money, but for him. And Russell came back. Hope flickered again when Hi-Five began working with a young R. Kelly, who was still performing with public announcement. He wrote and produced Quality Time, a warm, melodic single that climbed the charts and reminded the world of what the group could be. On the same album, a young Faith Evans made her debut singing background vocals. But success no longer carried the same sweetness. Behind the harmonies, shadows were growing. Their third album, Faithful, 1993, included strong songs like Unconditional Love, from Menace to Society, and Never Should Have Let You Go, from Sister Act 2. But Jive Records barely promoted it. The label knew the group intended to leave once their contract ended, and without the label's push, the album drifted quietly across the charts. Still, Jive wanted to keep Tony. They offered to renegotiate. They offered him a solo career. They wanted the magic of that voice to stay in the family. But the group believed they could find a better deal elsewhere. So they walked away, from the label that launched them, the system that broke them, and the safety net that might have held them together. Giant Records signed both Hi-Five and Tony as a solo act. Each member received a signing bonus. But even this moment of hope carried tension. Some inside the group wanted Russell fined for leaving earlier, cutting his payout in half. Russell refused, then left the group for good. Tony, now just 19, recorded his solo album Sexational with some of the greatest producers of the era. Babyface, Teddy Riley, Puff Daddy, Devante Swing, Missy Elliott, Joe, Usher, Faith. The album should have been his rebirth. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Sexational flopped on the charts. Giant Records panicked. And then, without warning, they dropped Tony, and dropped Hi-Five with him. For a young man who once stood center stage with the world cheering his name, the silence that followed was deafening. And in that silence, something inside Tony began to break, slowly at first, then completely. The fall had begun. From the outside looking in, Hi-Five appeared to be part of a golden era in American music, a time when R&B groups, especially young black male groups, shaped radio, TV, and pop culture. To many fans across the country, they weren't just another boy band. They were the boy band of their moment. Their harmonies carried the warmth of the church, the spark of youth, and the polish of New Jack Swing. But within the industry, their story reflected something deeper. The fragile, often unfair system young black artists faced in the 1990s. Record executives praised their talent but held tight control over finances. Hi-Five became a textbook example of how fame could rise faster than knowledge, and how many artists learned about recoupment only after realizing they were still broke despite platinum success. For older black audiences, their struggles echoed a familiar pattern seen with earlier icons, from blues musicians to Motown stars, extraordinary talent, limited protection. Among mainstream American listeners, Tony Thompson's voice became a generational memory. The Kissing Game played at school dances from New York to Atlanta to Los Angeles. Even now, when that first chord hits, people smile, not because of nostalgia alone, but because the song genuinely shaped an era. Younger generations discover Hi-Five through movie soundtracks, throwback playlists, and TikTok clips, proving their sound still resonates across decades. Yet when Tony's life spiraled, and eventually ended, the reaction from the public revealed another reality of American entertainment. The audience celebrates talent, but rarely sees the pain behind it. News outlets briefly covered his death, focusing on the unusual circumstances, huffing Freon, methadone in his system, but the deeper issues of addiction, mental health, and the pressures of early fame went largely unexplored. In America, especially in the black community, discussions about trauma and substance abuse often hide behind closed doors. Still, among R&B fans, DJs, and artists who grew up listening to him, Tony's legacy remains sacred. His influence is heard in the vocal runs of young singers, in the DNA of 90s playlists, and in every boy band that steps into the spotlight with harmony at its core. In the end, America loved Hi-Five. But it never fully understood what the group had survived to make that music possible. In the end, the story circles back to Waco, the same Texas town where Tony Thompson first lifted his voice in a church choir, long before the world knew his name. And it was in Waco, years later, that his journey came to a quiet, heartbreaking close. 31 years old. A life that had burned so brightly, extinguished too soon beside a row of air conditioning units humming through the night. But Tony Thompson's legacy never lived in the place where he died. It lives in the places where he made people feel alive. It lives in the opening chords of The Kissing Game, a song that could freeze time and pull listeners back into the softness of their youth. It lives in the harmonies of Hi-Five, a group that shaped the sound of 90s R&B and made space for the boy bands that came after them. It lives in every singer who grew up trying to imitate Tony's tone, pure, emotional, unmistakably his. And it lives in the memories of fans who didn't just listen to Hi-Five, they grew up with them. Tony's story is a reminder of how fragile brilliance can be. Of how the music industry can lift a child into the heavens without teaching him how to survive the fall. Of how addiction and trauma can take root in silence. And of how even the brightest stars sometimes struggle to carry their own light. But it is also a reminder of something beautiful. That when a voice truly touches people, it outlives the singer. Today, Hi-Five continues to perform. Marcus Sanders, Treston Irby, Shannon Gill, and new members still go on stage, still sing those songs, still speak Tony's name with love. Fans still show up. They still dance, still smile, still remember. In that way, Tony never left the stage at all. So maybe the real story isn't about how he died. Maybe it's about how deeply he lived, through music that continues to echo across generations. Before we close, let me ask you. What's the first memory that comes back when you hear The Kissing Game? And if Tony Thompson's journey moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own story, stay with us. There are more voices, more histories, more truths waiting to be told. Until next time, keep his story, and his songs, alive.